We're here, and I have Steve Woessner with me, and it is a pleasure to have you, Steve, on Live Talk with Becky Chernek. And before we get things started, for those dealers and viewers who may not know exactly who I am, can't believe that. How is that even possible? It can be possible. Anyway, I provide the very best in finance and insurance training for auto dealers throughout the USA, Canada. I mean, when it comes to change, boy, and really helping dealers to maximize those profits in finance, sales, whatever we need to do, I'm there to help. So, again, Steve, it's a pleasure to have you here with us tonight, or with me tonight. And for our dealers and viewers, if you wouldn't mind, please go ahead and share your background to get things started.
Sure. I spent just under 35 years with Ford Motor Company. Actually, before that, I worked a couple of years for Goodyear over in Europe, but most of my automotive experience is here in the US with Ford Motor Company. And then after I left Ford, I formed a consulting company, and I've been working with dealers in terms of process mapping, looking at the different processes they have in the store, how those interconnect, what opportunities there are for automation, and also looking at sort of the technological overview of their dealership and seeing how things fit together and seeing if we can find a better mousetrap.
Well, I will tell you, I am very excited about our conversation tonight, wherever that you are. And first and foremost, let's talk about this OEM Direct. Is that something that dealers need to, or dealership personnel need to be concerned about? What's going on with that whole thing?
I guess my opinion on that is I don't know that I would spend a lot of time being concerned about it, in the sense that a lot of what the OEMs are trying to do in terms of their digital connections with the customers is to try and figure out how can they alleviate pain points that they're seeing across the entire network. And a lot of times it really has to do with inconsistency across the dealer network. It's not that people are doing a bad job. It's just there's a lot of inconsistency in terms of customer satisfaction with what they're getting, depending on what store they're at. And so a lot of the efforts from the manufacturers are, how do we bring some consistency to this? How do we get to a situation where there's a degree of control that we can have over the process? And I think that's what's driving them to allow customers to do ordering, because again, that's something that they can manage and look at things. And it also, if they're dealing strictly with ordered vehicles, it's also very good from a predictive standpoint in terms of looking at what the demand's going to be in the future. So if you're looking at actual orders and you're building actual orders, you're not spending a whole lot of time building stock units, because in many cases you don't need them. Plus, stock units are expensive for everybody. They're expensive for the dealer to carry. They're expensive for the company to put incentives out there to try and move. So really what they're trying to do is to build some consistency to it and to find a way to create a more consistent, call it a user-friendly system for the customers. They're trying to find a way, how do we make it easier for them to do business with us?
Okay, so how can that impact maybe what's going on in F&I?
Well, I think when you take a look at it, a lot of what's happening right now is, by and large, the OEMs, when it comes to F&I, when it comes to the various departments in the dealership, they have a tendency, as much as possible, to sort of take a hands-off approach until they see an issue. And usually that issue is something that would be addressed by a zone manager or by somebody in the regional entity, rather than trying to address it nationally. And I think they look at it and see, customers have issues as it relates to having that online experience mirrored in the dealership. So that conflict that those customers have, whether it's at F&I or whether it's sales or service or with parts availability, those are things the company's usually monitoring in terms of customer satisfaction. And as long as the customer satisfaction numbers are there, they tend to be less concerned about it. But when a dealership shows signs that the customer satisfaction numbers are dropping off, market share numbers are dropping off, that's when companies have a tendency to be more focused on it. But if those numbers are good, by and large, they take a hands-off approach. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the best way the dealership could be doing it. In a lot of cases, dealers are better off if they look internally and know for themselves, look, our processes are solid, everything works well. When the customer comes in, we make it a seamless experience, their transition through. And a lot of companies now are working really hard to provide technology to facilitate that. And a lot of tech right now is really designed to make it easier for the customer. And it's sort of that driven a little bit by that Amazon experience, but as easy as you can make it for the customer. And so if they can manage this digital process from digital communication online to personal communication at the dealership and have it seamlessly flow through, that's ideally what they're looking to do.
So we have some comments tonight, so I just wanted to make sure that I'm recognizing everyone. Joe Caruso, thank you so much. You remember Joe from earlier, right? Today that we were on that clubhouse together. What a great conversation that was. And Mr. Larry Feldman's here in the house. Great to see you, Larry. And yeah, there's Joe. And then we have, could you please arrange these interesting live sessions earlier? It is too late in Algeria. Who is that? He's your friend. Oh, he's my friend too.
Kudos. I give you all kinds of recognition for being engaged at that time of night. So yes.
I love it. It's
well done.
Awesome. Good for you. Awesome. Good evening. Ted Ings is in the house. He is here to say hello and thank you, Ted Ings. I appreciate your support always. So we were talking about, okay, so more and more dealers, yeah, we see the need to bring in some technology to help with this engagement, right? So we have the DR tools, and some of our conversation tonight is regarding these digital retailing tools. And Brian Davis is here. Thank you, Brian. And okay, so how well are we integrating the online tool to what's really taking place in the dealership? And I mean, really, what's going on with that whole thing?
Well, right now, a lot of the technology that's been invested, tech companies invest a huge amount of money in these systems to make the online experience smooth and, you know, pictures and video and all of that. And then for a lot of people, they kind of expect that natural flow just to flow right into the dealership. So online, you know everything about them. They've given you their information, you're talking, et cetera, et cetera. Then you get into the store and you talk to the salesperson and you're asking about an ESP contract or you're asking about some other thing. And they go, yeah, I don't know about that. You have to talk to F&I about that, or you have to talk to service about that. And that in their mind creates a disconnect in the sense that, well, I gave you that information. You know, I mean, I told you all that. Why do you not know? Why are you not able to put this all together for me? And I think right now the big challenges are the sheer diversity of dealerships that you have across the country. Each one's a little bit different. The processes are a little bit different. The level of technical capability in the dealership, the skill set is different. And I think the biggest challenge right now is that dealers need to really take time and look internally at what they actually have. What do you have in the way of tech for F&I? What do you have in the way of tech for sales, for service, for parts? They all have systems. In most dealerships, you have systems in place already. How well do these systems connect? And how well do they connect from a customer perspective? You know, you want them to work really, really well internally for your employees. So there's a degree of, you know, functionality internally that works really, really well. But you also want it to be something that's easy for the customer to pass through. It's easy for them to come in. They've landed on a car. They have an idea what they want to do. They've been approved, you know, by the finance company or whatever. All of these things, they kind of see it as, That all should be done. And for most stores, the big challenge is figuring out, what do you have? What's your system look like? And then what really has to happen is a degree of customization that you have to take on as a dealership. You have to start to look at, what do I really need? What do I need in the way, where are the holes? Where are the gaps? Where are the pain points for my customers at my dealership? So the reality is you need to take tech, which is created kind of for the masses, and you need to have it customized within your store based on what you choose to use. And a lot of these technologies have all kinds of packages and all kinds of capabilities. In some cases, you don't need that. So why not take the time up front to look at your own internal things, to look at what's working, what isn't working. You should be the best judge of that at the store. And then once you know what you have and how well you function and how well your people handle change and how well, all of these things, once you know that, then you're in a much, much better position to have conversations with tech companies, with other vendors and suppliers to put together a package of things that work really, really well for your dealership and your customers. And if you do that, the connectivity that you create with your customers and the sense of belonging, they want to come to you, they want to be on the team, okay? They like that feeling, okay? They don't want this cold, amorphous, they want a relationship. If you can create that for them, then this whole discussion about, are dealers relevant in the future, in a sense, goes away, because the customers are going to choose what's relevant and what's not. And if you make that connection and you've done taken the time to do it and you've got that connectivity, they don't want to give that up. They've invested a hell of a lot of time and effort buying a car from you. They don't want to give that up.
Well, I feel like we have digital retailing. I think we're getting an echo. Sorry about that, guys. But I feel like the digital retailing, I think dealers need to have a definition, what they want it to be. What is it? So for an example, do you want it to be a lead gen? That's it. Get the customer in the dealership. We're going to do whatever it takes to get that customer liking us. They're going to shop with us. We might give them some terms that could be available to them depending upon their lender guidelines. Or we might go in a little bit deeper, offering a soft pull analysis and giving even a more deeper dive into the terms that would be available, or based off of credit criteria or budget. But then after that, what do y'all want? What are you looking to achieve? And once the customer makes their way into the dealership, it's like all bets are off. And I think that's where it's frustrating. And it's, I talked to another F&I director, big group, and his name will go nameless. And hopefully I can get him on the show as well, because he's talking about, what, this is very frustrating. Because what we're trying to do here is do this online, but how are we connecting the dots? What do we need to do to get this customer? What processes should we be putting in place to connect that engagement, to keep the engagement going?
Yeah, well, I would submit that the first place to look for that could well be internally talking to your people, because the people on the front lines, the people that are interacting with your customers on a daily basis, they probably know better than anybody in the dealership what the customers are looking for. And I think it needs to be a constant theme in your mind of, what does the customer want? How can I make it easier for them to do business with me? And it can be little things, little tweaks that you make to a current process that you have that makes it easier for them. You'd be amazed at the amount of time and money that you save, but also the amount of goodwill you generate on behalf of the customer, because they visibly see that you care. And that's a key element in gaining their trust and allowing them to feel comfortable and connected. And that's really what you want. I mean, that's what the whole experience is supposed to be about. So I would focus very heavily on the customer, and you can get a lot of insight from your people inside.
Well, I'm not trying to take away from the tech providers. I really am not. Everybody has a different way of doing things. They have a different thought philosophy when it comes to what that digital journey looks like. But I think it's so important that the dealer understand whatever that philosophy is. Does it match with what's going on in my own store with my own people? You know, I talk about this because like training, just the training in of itself. And I can tell you how many times I talk about the interview process until the cows come home. And everybody knows me. Oh, it's Becky and the interview. But I wonder, because why are you sending your F&I person to a workshop if you can't support the training? And so when that individual gets back to the dealership, it's all bets are off. And here we are. What interview? What are you talking about? Get back in that office. We don't have time for this stuff. What are you all doing? And that's the disconnect. And that's the real, what I call the real world. So let's define what is that process and stick to it so everyone can be on the same page.
Right. Well, I think the tech companies, quite honestly, they're doing what they believe the customers want, which is simplicity and ease of functionality. And is it smooth and easy for me to go? If you look at most tech approaches, that's kind of the thought process behind a lot of it. That's a great starting point, but that has to be carried all the way through. And that's why you can't have, one set of rules apply online and another set of rules apply at the dealership. So you kind of have to take a look at, okay, what's my online presence and how does my real life presence match that? And those two worlds need to be very close together. And quite honestly, the tech companies are quite happy to adjust their packages or your needs or wants to what your customers want. I mean, they're quite happy to do that. They're looking to build the number of stores that are in their system. But there's all kinds of way to customize things if you know what you're asking for, if you know what you need. And in many cases, the technologies that they have far more capability than many times most dealerships even scratch the surface on. I mean, you have some fancy tech out there and you go talk to the guys and go, yeah, we use that to write ROs. And that's it? That's all you do with it? Or yeah, we use that to print contracts. But there's tons of stuff behind that. The capability of a lot of these systems to customize things for you inside your store. I mean, that ease and simplicity that they're selling to the customer, they're also selling to the dealership. And quite honestly, that's what the tech companies are looking for.
So we've got some comments tonight I wanted to share. I don't know if you had a chance to see them as I was going through them, but Brian Davis, let the in-store team see that they'll make more money if they try to understand where the customer is in the process instead of pushing their agenda.
Yes.
What are your thoughts with that?
I think that's quite right, because what you're doing here is you're responding to what the customers, where are they at in this process? Because it's kind of interesting because the online experience for customers varies as well. Because some of them really like it and they get way deep into the weeds, and then there are other customers that just want some basic information. And whatever that experience is, the key is to let that experience drive what you're doing at the store. So as he said here, don't push your own agenda. Understand and listen to the customer. And in many cases, it's listening to what they have to say and then saying, oh, no, that's great. We have a way to make this very simple, very easy. It's that simplicity and that ease where they don't feel like something's happening that they don't know about or that there is another agenda. It should be their agenda. Okay, they're making the second biggest purchase they're ever going to make when they buy a car. And for them, it's a once in a 5, 6, 8, 10-year time period. Yeah, for you, there's 4 or 5 a day, but that's not the case for them. So you have to recognize where they're at. I think that's a great comment.
Joe Caruso says customers want information and dealers want to hide the information.
No, sorry, guys. The days of hiding information are over. They've been over.
Oh, they're still trying.
If they've been open for a while, and if you haven't figured that out, you're in a lot of trouble, because customers know they have access to so much information so easily. And when you start to tell them things that, essentially lie to them, like you said, they can see through it. They and once you do that, you've totally lost their trust.
And
So
Michelle
you're much better
McLean,
off to be accommodating and forthcoming. And believe me, so many times you ask customers, I've been in workshops and ask customers, what do you think is a fair profit for a dealer on a vehicle that costs $45,000? You'd be amazed at the numbers they come back with. They come back with some ridiculous. You go, really? I think the dealer is making like $1,500, and you think he should be making $5,000. But if you say to somebody, look, you have something that's worth $50,000 or $60,000 or $70,000 and you're selling it, what kind of profit do you think would be a fair profit? And in many, many cases, they're way beyond what reality is. And I think just the fact that, bring them in, let them know that you care. And that is the single biggest thing for most people, is honestly, nobody cares what you know till they know that you care. And I've heard that before, but that's the truth. They just are waiting to see, do you actually care about me as an individual? And I would say that actually applies more strongly the younger you get. If someone's in their 20s and 30s, man, they are sold on that. They are not mass marketing subjects in some experiment you're running. They are individuals, and if you don't treat them as an individual, they're gone. And in their case, they also care deeply about, what does your company stand for? What do you do in the community? That's a big deal to them. Some guy like me, am I getting a fair deal? Are you being straight with me? I'm pretty happy about that. And so you've got variations, and again, that's the customization, and the only one that can adjust to that is the dealer.
So what do you think about this? I'm going to put you on the spot there. What do you think about all this going on as far as, dealers are holding their own. They're making more profit than they've ever made ever. Customer walks in, MSRP. Doesn't matter. New car, pre-owned, whatever. So how do you see this whole thing shaking out?
Well, I think, again, the challenges come back to when you're talking about the price of vehicles. A lot of that, whatever's going to haunt you on that, will come down the road. When people come back in with a trade and they paid, $5,000 over sticker, and now, cars are going for $5,000 under sticker, they're going to be upside down pretty significantly, and you're going to have a lot of water in that deal that you're going to have to bake into the next one, which is going to make it very, very difficult to get them out of their car at a monthly payment that they think is fair. So you're going to have to deal with a lot of that. But I do think that a lot of times, customers are they're happy to pay a fair price if they believe that it's a fair price. And in many cases, because you've got so much noise in the air, a lot of times customers don't really know what they're getting. And it's that not knowing and that being uncertain that makes you distrust. And when you're in that mindset, it's, anything that comes up, you're immediately questioning it. Whereas, but I have no issues at all with dealers making a profit. As a matter of fact, that's what you're in business to do. Okay. And I don't see any problem with that. But I think the fact is, you have to start to weigh it into, what is the future going to be? You want to retain these customers. You don't want to just sell them once. You want to sell them again and again and again. And when you look at the lifetime value of a customer that comes back and does business with you again and again and again, compare that dollar amount to the extra $4,000 or $5,000 that you made on this deal. Trust me, you're taking the short end of the deal if you take the $5,000 now. So it's just recognizing that balance and being in a position to adjust for it as time goes on, but recognize that that's what's going to happen down the road. Now, the fact that there was no inventory across the entire industry,
right?
That's never happened before. So every manufacturer is going to be in the same boat. Every dealer is going to be in the same boat. I don't think that's going to be a unique problem, but I do think that for a lot of dealers, they need to think about that in terms of their customers, because you don't care about the Toyota or the Ford or whatever your other friend. You care about your customers. And how are you going to handle them? How are you going to set it up so that they're not hurt out of all of this? And as long as you keep that in the back of your mind constantly about how you adjust things, then I think, like Michael says here, full transparency, I've always believed in that, because at the end of the day, I'm too dumb to remember the lies. So it's much easier just to tell the truth and be upfront and straightforward with people. And you'd be amazed at how well people react to that.
So we also have another comment from Ismail. Do I say that right? I have worked with organizations, car business, where the customer is called guest?
Yes.
Guest. Oh, guest. Thank you. Guest. And employee called associate. These two concepts summarize the close relationship between the three actors: employer, employee, and customer.
Yes, I agree. And again, you can, terms matter. I think that's why when I listen to and you say the term dealer, okay, that tends to have a relatively negative connotation when you think of dealer, okay? When you think of salesperson or salesman, they're coming to get it. A lot of these things carry negative connotations. I think adjusting the word track and adjusting the relationship and, make it genuine, make it real. I think those terms are very good. I agree.
I just think that if you're going to utilize this technology, whatever that is, that it has to not only support what you're doing online, what is it that you're doing online? Where do you want to take it online? How far down in the digital journey are we going? To what end? What's the purpose? And then from there, how do we meet with that customer once they get into the dealership? I think that is a plan that we have to, embrace. Look like what Brian Kramer did. He's an amazing GM who spent the time necessary, and he took advantage of a situation. He took advantage. Here it is. We've got COVID, and you know what? We need to do something different here. We need to wrap our arms around this. We want to digitalize the entire process. And now, not only did he accomplish that, but he's maximizing profits in F&I. He has cut down all the BS. He has reduced the time that it takes to buy a car. He's cut out CIT. He has cut out chargebacks. How much is that worth? And all the distractions. So if I was a dealer, I'd be sitting back and going, okay, well, maybe I'm not buying into this or that or the other, but here's what I am going to buy into. If I can minimize the distractions, if I can quit having customers coming back and forth and chasing steps and the CIT and all the in chargebacks, and create a much more pleasant environment and still be able to maximize profits, why wouldn't I want to go do that?
And I think the technology gives you the ability to do two things which are really kind of interesting when you put them together. One is making the process smooth and easy, but accurate and consistent, okay? Computers, those systems, they don't make the human errors that you make if you're having a bad day or you misput a number or whatever. Those systems are very accurate and they're very consistent. So that also builds integrity and honesty, but it also avoids you having expensive mistakes. But what you get out of the two things, which is kind of interesting, you get increased customer satisfaction. At the same time, you get increased employee satisfaction because the system is easy to handle. They know how it works. They're very comfortable with it. It's those kind of things. And when you talk to Brian, I mean, he put together what he called a Skunks Works team, but it's that team that I talked about where you put together a team in the store. And what did they do during COVID? They looked at their processes. They looked at the little things. And I talked to him. He said it wasn't a lot of big changes we made. We made a lot of little changes to processes that we thought were doing pretty good. But you know what? When we looked at it more closely, this group came together and they found adjustments to make. And they made little adjustments. And hey, all of a sudden, it runs more smoothly. And then he's looking at it going, okay, well, what tech can I put in here to eliminate these mistakes, to make sure the accuracy is 100%? Do we do this 100% of the time, every time? Yep. If I use this system, I do. And you know what? As an employee, I'm just as happy that the system does it for me. That way I don't need to freak out about whether I'm making a mistake or not. So he did a lot of those things, and he used the last 18 months, and he's way ahead of the curve when it comes to that. And the same thing with the tech that he has. I think that's, he's got a lead of 18 months on learning, and his team learning how to do this. If you wait too long, you're never going to catch him. You're never going to catch him.
So we have Michelle McLean. If you look at the market like New York, for instance, and Brian Benstock's store, they are ready for a fully digitalized process. But small town USA isn't necessarily going to be on board. It's about the market demand. What are your
It's about
thoughts
the
about
customer.
that? Yeah.
It's about the customer. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, look, we say we do all this with the customer in mind, but it's kind of ironic that most of the time we're doing stuff and we don't think about the customer at all. What you're talking about here is exactly right. The customers in that New York market, okay, are more technologically engaged. Brian's done a lot of things to bring his dealership personnel up to speed on technology. He works with Google. He's got a lot of things going on in that store. So the fact that his employees are very comfortable with technology and his customers are, perfect fit. If you go out into some rural markets, that may not be the case. And you know what? That's okay. Because at that store, you adjust your technological needs to the needs of your customers. And in a lot of cases, the customers are quite happy if you have a system that's much more accurate, doesn't make mistakes, doesn't leave things out. They're great with that. They're not the ones doing that. Your people are. The customer doesn't have to do anything tech if they don't want to, but you can make it very smooth and very seamless and very easy to communicate with them, even if they're not tech savvy. But I think you're absolutely right. In New York, hell, he's dialed in perfectly. I've watched him and listened to what he has to say, and he's spot on. He's got it.
He really is. I mean, he's got it. So every area is going to be different than the next, I would imagine. I happen to agree with that.
Look at the work he put in. So he didn't do that by accident. He didn't just fall into that. And I think a lot of times people are looking for this silver bullet that somebody's going to come along or the manufacturer is going to come along and fix everything for me. They're not, okay? Because there isn't a silver bullet. And if you ask Brian, he'll tell you there isn't. If you look at all the different things he did and the systematic way that he built that operation up, he knew what he was doing from the beginning, and he just systematically went after it and stayed with it. When he had challenges, he worked around them. He got his team going. And
that's what it takes. I mean, it does take that. I mean, it does take rolling up your sleeves and figuring this stuff out. And
put in the work.
It does. I mean, your perception is not necessarily the reality, and we talked about that earlier today as well. And I can tell you, and I'm sure you have done the same thing here, Steve. But a dealer perception may not necessarily be what's really happening in the store. And, their best bet is to really figure that out together, and how that technology or whatever process they want to put in place is how is that going to impact sales and profitability. It goes back to the day, we put in menu selling years ago. I mean, I'm dating years ago, right? And it was, hey, we put that in because if you do, it's going to make a big impact in your F&I performance, but it's also going to cut down on chargebacks. And it's also going to cut down on the time it takes to get that customer in and out of the F&I office, which means, of course, it's a lot more profitable. But you got to size it up. It's got to. Every store is different, as you mentioned. Every process is different, and how you manage that change, whether it be utilizing just even a digital menu provider for that much matter. Are we going digital menu, or are we sticking with paper menu? What are we doing here? Even any of that is going to make a difference. And we have in the house, and I do want to make sure that I say hello to Amy Shelton, Michelle McLean. Your brother was just texting me. Go figure, small world. And then we have Amy Shelton's in the house. And then let's take a look here. We've got you give the client what they want and how they want it. Right, Amy? Absolutely. Put in the work. I love that. Okay, Stephen Apostella, here we go. DX, digital transformation, or transformation is a relevant conduit for legions of people, city or royal. It's just another desired pathway for those that prefer it in 2022. Did I say that right?
Yeah, close enough.
All right. So
Yeah, it doesn't mean
what
the
did I
dealer
butcher?
turns off. It doesn't mean they turn off their phone or, locks their doors. I mean, I think he's right. I mean, that's the nice thing about the digital space right now. A lot of this stuff is new. It's still evolving. Things are moving at an interesting pace. And the funny thing about technology is it doesn't happen everywhere universally. It happens in various stages, but eventually it happens. It's like change. Change doesn't happen the same everywhere, but it happens. If you look back 10, 12 years ago, nobody even knew what this was. Now you can't live without it, and so it went from being something that was amazing and stunning to being, no, this is an everyday tool. Nobody's pretty wowed about it, but when new tech comes out, people are interested in getting a new phone, but phone's a phone and they don't think of it any differently and not the way they did 10 years ago. That's technology is going to do that. And in some markets, it'll go faster and others, it'll go slower. And that's why, again, I keep coming back to this, but you have to know your own store, and if a dealer doesn't want to get into the Grimble, great, don't, but have your general manager do it. Have somebody lead that effort inside your store so that you actually know what's happening, because 90% of the time when you talk to a dealer, they'll tell you what they think is happening. And if you go out and stand in the lane or stand in the showroom or watch the F&I, you'll find that, that process is not happening the way you think it's happening. People are working around different things and, maneuvering and that kind. It's very inconsistent. And the problem with that is the customers see that. Okay, they're not blind. Okay, they see that inconsistency, and that inconsistency makes them question the process. And when they question the process, you lose their trust.
Well, I totally agree with that one. That's for sure. So we also want to talk a little bit about, while we're here tonight, EV and products. And where is that whole thing going? Gosh, we almost spent a good 30 minutes on that topic just on the phone. Yeah. So I did want to touch on that because I feel like that is an area that, I don't know, maybe people are seeing that like 5 years out down the road, like not that big of a deal. It's like, we've got bigger fish to fry, Becky. Don't worry about the EV because that's not happening anytime soon. I mean, look at it. That whole ship blew up. But I don't know if all the cars blew up. But anyway, so it's like, all right. So now, what about these products? What's going on there? What's that whole thing all about?
I think the manufacturers, for the first time, are getting a lot of pressure on this whole sustainability issue. The idea that, look, at some point, you're going to have to figure out this transition. You can't keep dumping, it's like you can't keep dumping plastic into the ocean. Sooner or later, it's going to fill up. So you got to figure out another way. And what they're looking at here and now is they watched Tesla take the lead on this, and they watched a company that for years made no money, but had valuations that were higher than General Motors. And so you're going, that doesn't make any sense. These guys aren't making any money. A lot of it had to do with the looking forward to the whole sustainability issue and the idea of how do we do something that doesn't continue to pollute, that doesn't continue to place those kind of pressures on the world. And I think now you're starting to see manufacturers take that to heart. I know at Ford, they are very, very serious about it. And if you look at Toyota's got a whole raft of vehicles that are ready to start coming through the system as they click over to some of this EV. Now, is this going to happen again? Is this going to happen the same everywhere? No, it isn't. It isn't. Some of these EVs are going to be very big in metros or in downtown areas. They may not be as big in rural areas. But as time goes forward and as the capability of these electric vehicles gets greater and greater and greater, if you take a look at what the original Tesla looked like, and then you look at Rivian vehicles, or Rivian as I guess they're called, there's literally no resemblance other than they both run on batteries. But the distances they can run, the kind of capability that they have, and then I think all the connected pieces of it, EV gives the manufacturers an opportunity to put a lot of these subscription things in, because the way the vehicle operates is completely different than a combustion engine. And so you can put subscriptions in where you can get apps that make the car do different things. And it's all electric. So all of these apps and all of these systems function to allow you to do that. So the manufacturers are looking at this, and GM made this comment a while ago that these subscription models that they're looking at, they anticipate massive revenues from that. If I was a dealer, I want to know where I fit in.
Yeah, of course. Let me just see where okay, so how do car dealers fit in with this subscription thing? I mean, I've talked about it in the past and in different shows that I've been on as a host, but it just never went to where we thought it was going to go. And now you're saying there is a good possibility that this is a model that OEMs are going to maybe embracing.
Well, I mean, a lot of it comes back to the customer. I mean, take a look at I remember when I first got my phone and I had, I don't know, 2 apps on it. My daughter was laughing at me. She's like, Dad, that's not really a phone. You got to have more apps than that. Now I look at it today, I must have 100 on there for various different things, different companies that I work with, different areas. It's an app. And that's essentially, if you look at that screen in a Tesla, it's a massive computer screen that they've got in there. Believe me, anything that you can do on your computer, you can do in that car. And that functionality and that capability, and then the idea that you pay for what you need type of thing. Like if you want the really fancy whatever, okay, it costs more. If you just want the basic one, okay. And you don't care about that capability, so that you don't feel that's a loss, but you're saving the money. Whereas somebody else, they want to be Mr. Cool and they want to have all that. Well, that's going to cost a little bit more. But what's really interesting about an EV vehicle is the kind of things you can do with an electric vehicle. I mean, I think we were talking the other day about, and Brian said the same thing. One of the biggest things on an electric vehicle that's a maintenance item is tires. Now, who would have thought that? But tires, because it's a light switch. You throw it on, you throw it off. And so the acceleration on it is very strong. In most cases, you've got these low profile, softer tires, just chewing them up. But that's something, again, as a dealership, you look at as a stream of revenue and an opportunity for you. But there are going to be tons of these types of things that come along with the technology, because for all of the things that the technology facilitates, it creates a need for a bunch of other things. And so a lot of that shift is really a matter of, again, understanding your customers, understanding your market, and figuring out where these streams of revenue work for you. And you look at like Brian Benstock they talked about earlier. I mean, that remote service deal for him, huge deal. It kept them from putting another point in. It created a massive increase in his service business, and it works for him. That may not be the model for everybody, but that works for him in his market because he's taken the time to figure that out. And I think if dealers do that, and there are plenty of very, very capable dealers. I have huge respect for them. They have a tough job and they're constantly balancing things. But I think if they put their heads in the sand and they don't write their own story, somebody else is going to write it for them. And I don't think they can afford to wait. I don't think they can do that. And I'm not asking them to go out and buy a bunch of fancy toys. Put a committee together in your dealership and start to look at the processes, look at reality today. Where are you today? And then build from there and make sure that the pieces that you're buying fit together. so they actually work together. Don't be
That's
wowed by
something.
the latest toy. I mean, and I think a lot of guys can do this. It just requires an effort on their part to do it, and it requires them to exercise a muscle that a lot of dealers don't like to exercise, and that's called planning. So at the end of the day, they have to plan more than 30 days out. They have to start to think of this thing as an evolving situation. My store is an entity that is evolving constantly. And every day, like Brian does, I look for ways to make it better than it was yesterday. What did we do yesterday? What can we do better today? What can we do better tomorrow? What can we do better the next day? And in most cases, the big change that you see, like Brian Benstock's deal, that didn't happen overnight. He didn't throw the switch and the next day, hey, look at all this service we had. He built that over an extended period of time, working through the issues for his store. I mean, that's really what they have to do. And I think the electric vehicles are going to offer them a huge opportunity to do a bunch of things that they don't do now. But it is going to put a challenge when you look at the service department, for example. An EV is a very different thing than a combustion engine. You know?
Well, be it for me to mention this, but I will mention this, that when I'm reading automotive news and there was an article, I think it was in Automotive News, about Gap product in the state of California. And they're talking about taking Gap off the menu in that state again. So how many vehicles are being sold in the state of California? And what's the impact? So this is why it's so important to keep your head around what's going on in that profit center, right? So if it's not Gap, what other product will it be to replace that?
But you can look at things
customer friendly.
You look at things like someone mentions here, the problem is the lack of charging stations. It's kind of interesting. Ford Motor Company has hired a whole group of people, and their sole job is to go out across the country and work on this exact problem. How do I get the infrastructure in place to support the EV business model that I'm working on and spending billions of dollars on? They're already working on, where can I put these stations? Where can we get this stuff? How do we get them into customers' homes? Do they become, maybe you go to home builders that are building homes today and have them include a charging station in the house as part of the build. I mean, you wouldn't build a house without plumbing. So why not include the charging station in there as part of the house build? But there are tons of ways to do that. And I think there's an opportunity there. But I can tell you the manufacturers are going to move forward with it because they've invested huge amounts of money. And EV has significant potential from a customer standpoint. So those two things are going to drive this. And again, California is going to do what they do. New Jersey's going to do what they do. New York's going to do what they do. I mean, that's one of the headaches the manufacturers have when they look at the entire country. But a lot of times they have to make adjustments to that. I think for dealers, you just have to make adjustments for your local area. I mean, that's what you need to look at. But it's not going away. EV's coming.
Well, I agree. I just, I think many of us feel as if EV is in the future, not here, 5 years down the road. And I think that it's important that dealers say, okay, well, if this is what we're dealing with, maybe it's time to look at some of the products that we have on our menu that make sense today for our consumers. And that's kind of where I was going with that.
I like Stephen's line, resisting transformation is a self-inflicted wound.
It's true, though. But you see that a lot in the car business. It is what it is.
Yeah, there's a variety across people. There's a variety across markets. I mean, that's what makes the United States, again, that's our greatest weapon and our greatest weakness. At the end of the day, the strength of all the diversity is there, and the diversity creates a lot of conflict, which we're dealing with now. But I think it all moves forward. It continues to evolve, and it will. And like I said, there'll be some markets, will move faster than others. That doesn't mean that it's never coming to your market. It just means you have a little bit more time to adjust. And all I'm saying to you is be ready when it does come, okay? Because you've taken the time ahead of time to look at it. Most of this analysis should be anywhere from a 3 to a 5-year plan that you're working on. This is not something you're going to bingo and hey, guess what? We fixed the whole store and it took us an hour and a half. That's not going to happen. So
Bingo.
I just think they need to be more conscious of that. And the sooner you start, the better off you're going to be. It's that simple. And most of this stuff, as Brian talked about the other day, it doesn't cost a lot of money. I mean, this Skunk Works team that he put together doesn't cost him a lot of money. He's not spending huge amounts of money, but he is figuring out where he can save money. And then that money that he's saving, he's plowing into areas where he needs to have an upgrade or he needs to have better performance. So in his world, the cost is cost neutral, but he has substantially upgraded his capability by doing that. And
so
he said that.
So I appreciate that Brian Kramer's message is loud and clear. Burn all the ships in the harbor. I get that, but it's a tough road because you're asking this individual to change, and change is very uncomfortable, and especially if it's affecting my pay plan. So I had Dory Moonsey on, his F&I manager, and I was delighted to have her on because she talked through the pain point. It was uncomfortable. She didn't want to do it. She didn't want to go completely digital. I mean, and Brian was the one that said, you know what? Okay, we're gonna have a problem with this. Not a problem. I'm going to go ahead and take the printers out of the F&I offices. Now, he gave them no choice. But but maybe sometimes it's what we need. But this is what's difficult. Even when I went and started utilizing menu selling back in the day, I'm like, why do I want to do this? I'm really good at what I was doing before. I was making a lot of profit, a lot of money. My paychecks are great. Why do I want to change anything that I'm doing? And that's really what we're dealing with, right? It's like, why? What's in it for me?
Well, you have a serious fear of failure. I mean,
Yes,
right
I
now,
do.
like you said, you said you were making a lot of money. You were very successful.
Yeah.
I bet the dealer was really thrilled with how you were performing. And somebody comes in with some new whiz bang thing and they says, oh, we can make it even better. And your first thought is, well, you could also make it worse because
That's
while
exactly
it may be
right.
it may be a better thing that you've got there, but I may not be as good at doing that as I am at doing what I have now. So for me, it would be worse. It may be a better tool, but if I don't know how to use it, they might find somebody who does, and that would be bad for me. So this whole resistance to change, and again, that's where I think this group inside the dealership, they really have to do a combination of looking at the systems and walking the people through. But it's a lot of, the Skunk Works team, he has people from all different levels in the company. So it's not like, oh, the bosses are deciding everything. People at your level are there. And so if you want to talk to them and they'll tell you, yeah, we're looking at this. Here's why we're doing it. That's the other thing that team is absolutely has to do is explain the why. I mean, Simon Sinek says it all the time, but that is so powerful. Most people in a dealership, just like most people in major companies, they don't know why they're doing what they're doing. They're just doing it because, well, that's my job. That's what I've been told to do. But if you understand the why, the energy behind that is huge. That is so big for people. And a lot of people in a dealership, they don't understand why. Why is the boss changing?
I know what I'm doing. I've been here longer than you. You come in here with your new bag of tricks. Who do you think you are? And I can show you more than what you can show me.
Right.
And this is exactly what takes place. And I again, I realize that fear factor. I know what I had to go through to make changes in the way I did F&I, which benefited me throughout my career. But again, it's the initial fear factor it's like jumping off a freaking cliff.
Yeah. Well, but I do think there's that quote that says, if you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance even less.
Well, some of these guys, I got to tell you, they just don't like a lot of change.
Because that's what's
Amy
going to happen.
Shelton says, that's how we always done it. So she knows what I'm talking about. It's, we can talk about this till the cows come home, but these guys in the dealership, in the trenches, this is what they've been doing. It's like, for example, I can talk about a digital menu and it makes all the sense in the world. Right? It speeds up the entire process. It reduces the mistakes. It gets into e-contracting that much faster. But yet everyone will insist and pull out this paper menu. And it's tough to teach an old dog new tricks. I'm just telling you, it just is. And it's like, get over it already. It's okay. Just let go. Let them have, control of this presentation. Let them feel as, if you're in control, then you get control. But
for the old dog, if you move his food bowl, he'll find it. He'll find it. So just change the pay plan. He'll find the food bowl. Trust me on this. I mean, that's how they got to where they got to already, because they were following the pay plan. And if you think it through and you put the pay plan in place, that incentivizes people to use that system. Hey, guess what? They may not be happy about it, but you know what? The food bowl's over there now. It's not over here, so we better get to it.
Well, in closing, if you would, Stephan, share with us what you think this is all going to be like. I mean, as we put all this into place and managing this digital retailing in dealership, even Tekion for that much matter, how you see this thing playing out in the next year or so.
Well, in the next year or so, I don't think you're going to see dramatic things. If you look at the next 5 years, and then and one of the things you really ought to sort of ask yourself is, over the next 5 years, what do you see as the top 3 challenges, and what do you see as your top 3 opportunities? And that at least gives you a starting point at your store for working at it. But what I would tell you is, just like other changes, change is coming. The challenge that you're going to face the most right now is change is coming at a much faster rate. And when they open up and they actually get 5G and they open that pipeline up so the technology can really come through at a speed that it needs to come through based on what we envision it to be. I mean, they have flying cars. I mean, everybody said, oh, by 2020, we'd all be, George Jetson. I know I date myself, but the fact of the matter is, you're going to have flying cars. It's just a matter of how it comes out, where it comes out, where does it start? And most of these things find a place where they start. There's an evolution, there's a time period, there's a lot of work and a lot of stuff that goes in. And the interesting thing is, in that area, they develop the concept and the product. And then in other areas, boom, it happens like that, because it's now a developed concept. It's not something that I'm learning or building or whatever. And the key is to be far enough in front of the curve so that you can see some of these things coming before they hit you. And if you do that locally for yourself, you'll be in a much, much better position to make adjustments. And that's something, quite honestly, that I think dealers are experts at, is making adjustments. Yeah. But if you don't take the time now to set that foundation in your store of thinking that way, let's look ahead. How do we get a little better tomorrow than we were today? Just gradually think that way as you move forward. I think that's going to be the sort of best case scenario. The worst case scenario is you have a bunch of people put their head in the sand, and some of them will survive and a lot of them will get run over. And I think when you start taking a look at the consolidation that's going on, you take a look at, I mean, come on, you're competing with guys that have billions of dollars, not exactly a even playing field. And the only differentiator you have are your customers. So my advice is, I would think every single day, how can I make it easier for them to work with me? How can I make it easier for my employees to deliver what I want them to deliver? How can I make it easy for them? How can I make it easy for my customers? If you do those two things, that connection is going to be huge, and you'll stay ahead of the curve, and you'll be one of the guys standing on the beach when the wave clears. Otherwise, not so much.
Well, thank you again, Stephen, for being on with me tonight in Live Talk with Becky Chernek. And let's do this again soon. Appreciate you.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Not